In the warm shallows of a coral reef, there is a creature no longer than your finger that can do something that sounds impossible. With a single snap of one claw, it fires a bullet made of water. That snap is one of the loudest sounds in the entire ocean. It creates a flash of light too quick for your eye to catch. And for a tiny fraction of a second, in a bubble smaller than a grain of sand, it heats a spot of water until it is nearly as hot as the surface of the sun. No teeth, no venom, no size to speak of. Just one oversized claw and a trick of physics so extreme that scientists did not fully understand it until the year 2000. This is the pistol shrimp. And the reason you have probably never heard it is that the most violent thing it does happens faster than you can blink. Inside a bubble, you would need slow motion cameras to see. So let me slow it all down and show you what a pistol shrimp really is, because the truth is even stranger than the headline, and the real science is more interesting than the myths. First, meet the animal. The pistol shrimp, also called the snapping shrimp, is small, usually around 3 to 5 centimeters long. There are hundreds of species of them, and they live in reefs, seagrass beds, and burrows in warm coastal waters all over the world. Most of the time, they are shy, hiding in cracks and tunnels, and you would walk right past one without a second glance. But do not let the shyness fool you about their numbers. In many reefs, pistol shrimp are not rare at all. They are everywhere, packed into the cracks and the sand by the thousands. They are some of the noisiest animals in the entire sea, and in a lot of coastal waters, their constant snapping is the single biggest source of background sound in the water. You just never connect that faint crackle to the tiny creatures making it. The silent ocean you might picture is, in many places, actually full of the sound of shrimp. But look at its claws, and you will spot something odd. They do not match. One claw is normal, small, a regular little pincer. The other is enormous, sometimes nearly half the size of the shrimp's entire body. That oversized claw is the pistol, and it does not work like a normal claw at all. It is not built to grab or to crush. It is built to snap. So, how does the snap work? Here is the mechanism, and it is beautiful. All, 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 The big claw has two parts, like a hammer and an anvil. The shrimp slowly cocks it open, pulling the upper part back and locking it in place, loading it with tension, like pulling back the hammer on a real pistol. Energy builds and builds, held by a kind of latch. Then the shrimp releases it. The upper part of the claw slams shut with astonishing speed, far faster than any muscle could move on its own. Just how fast is hard to picture. The claw snaps closed in well under 1,000th of a second, and it drives water out ahead of it at speeds around 25 meters per second, roughly 90 kilometers an hour. There is a little peg on one half of the claw that fits into a socket on the other. As the claw slams shut, that peg rams into the socket and squeezes the water out in a tight, focused, high-speed jet, like a syringe firing. That jet is the spark for everything that follows. All the light, the heat, and the sound come from this one stream of water, punched forward faster than a car on a highway. But the snap itself is not the weapon. This is the part that fooled people for a long time. When the claw slams shut, it does not hurt prey by hitting it. It works by forcing out a jet of water at such incredible speed that the water itself comes apart. Here is where it gets strange. When that jet of water shoots forward fast enough, the pressure inside it drops so low that the water briefly tears open and turns to vapor. It forms a tiny bubble, a little pocket of near vacuum in the middle of the sea. Scientists call this cavitation, and that bubble cannot last. The surrounding water crushes back in on it almost instantly, and the bubble collapses with tremendous violence. That collapse is the real weapon. In the year 2000, researchers used high-speed cameras to prove it. The shock wave from the bubble collapsing, not the claw itself, is what stuns or kills the shrimp's prey. A small fish or crab swims a little too close. The shrimp snaps, the bubble forms and bursts, and the shock wave knocks the prey senseless. The shrimp then drags its stunned meal back into its burrow. It hunts with a weapon made of nothing but collapsing water. For a long time, nobody understood this. People assumed the loud snap was simply the two halves of the claw smacking together, and that the shrimp just clubbed its prey with brute force. It took high-speed cameras, filming thousands of frames every second, paired with underwater microphones, to finally catch what was really happening. When researchers slowed the footage down, they saw it plainly. The loud snap and the prey's stunning shockwave both happened at the instant the bubble collapsed, not when the claw closed. The claw was only the trigger. The bubble was the bullet. And here is something that should make you respect that little bubble. Cavitation, this same violent collapse of vapor pockets in water, is a force that eats holes in steel. Over time, it pits and destroys the metal propellers of ships and the blades of industrial pumps. The pistol shrimp points that same destructive force at its dinner on purpose every single day, and it has been doing it for millions of years. And it gets stranger, because when that bubble collapses, it does not just make a shockwave. It also makes light. For a sliver of time as the bubble caves in, it gives off a tiny flash of light. Researchers named this effect shrimpoluminescence, a play on a related phenomenon called sonoluminescence. The flash is real, and it has been measured. But do not picture a glowing shrimp. The flash is far too faint and far too fast for the human eye to see, lasting less than a millionth of a second. As far as we know, the light serves no purpose at all. It is simply a byproduct, leftover energy escaping as the bubble dies. A creature this small is producing light by accident, just from the force of crushing water. Now we come to the claim in the title, the one about the sun. And I want to be completely honest with you, because this is where the internet usually goes too far. When the bubble collapses, all that energy gets squeezed into a vanishingly small space, and the temperature inside that collapsing bubble spikes enormously. Scientists estimate that, for a few microseconds, the interior of the bubble climbs past 5,000 Kelvin. To put that in perspective, the surface of the sun sits at around 5,700 Kelvin. So the honest version of the headline is this. For an instant, inside a bubble smaller than a grain of sand, the pistol shrimp creates a spot nearly as hot as the surface of the sun. But notice what that does and does not mean. It is not hotter than the sun, despite what you may have heard. It is briefly nearly as hot as the sun's surface, and only in that microscopic bubble for microseconds, before it is gone. And here is a detail most videos skip. That temperature is not measured directly. It is inferred from the flash of light, and the exact figure is still debated by scientists. So the truth is genuinely amazing, but it deserves to be told accurately. A finger-sized shrimp briefly heats a speck of water to thousands of degrees with a claw. We do not need to exaggerate that. It is incredible on its own. If you appreciate getting the real, honest version of these wild claims, instead of the inflated one, subscribe. Every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice, and we try to tell you what is actually true, not just what sounds good. And the sound, by the way, is the next thing we need to get right. Because the title also says louder than a gun, and this one needs care too. The snap of a pistol shrimp is genuinely one of the loudest sounds in the entire ocean. Measured at the source, it reaches around 210 decibels, with peak pressures even higher. That is an enormous amount of sound for an animal this tiny. In fact, relative to its body size, the pistol shrimp produces one of the most powerful sounds of any creature on Earth. But here's the honest catch, and it matters. You cannot directly compare decibels measured underwater to decibels measured in air. They use a different baseline, and sound behaves very differently in water than it does in air. So when people say the snap is louder than a gunshot or a jet engine, they are comparing two numbers that simply do not line up. The fair way to say it is this. The pistol shrimp snap is one of the loudest sounds in the sea, full stop. It does not need a misleading comparison to dry land to be astonishing. And here is just how loud it really is in practice. In some parts of the ocean, pistol shrimp gather in huge numbers, and the constant snapping of thousands of them at once creates a steady crackle, like the sound of frying bacon or burning twigs, filling the water for miles. That crackle is so loud and so constant that it interferes with sonar and underwater communication. During the Second World War, This was a real problem. The snapping shrimp noise made it harder to detect enemy submarines hiding in coastal waters. Submarines have reportedly used these noisy shrimp beds as cover, slipping into the racket to hide from listening sonar. An animal smaller than your thumb, helping to hide a warship. Scientists have even turned that noise into a tool. In some studies, the steady snapping of shrimp is loud and reliable enough that researchers listen to it to gauge the health of a reef. Because a busy, thriving reef tends to crackle with far more life than a dying, quiet one. The sound that once frustrated wartime sonar crews has become a way to measure the ocean's pulse. There is more to this shrimp than its weapon, though. It has a few other tricks that are easy to miss. For one, it can rebuild its pistol. If the shrimp loses its big snapping claw, something remarkable happens. The small claw on the other side slowly transforms into a new snapping claw, taking over the role, while a brand new small claw grows back where the snapper used to be. The shrimp does not just regrow a lost limb, it rearranges which side carries its weapon. The pistol can move from one hand to the other, and the snap is not only for hunting. Pistol shrimp use it on each other too. When two of them square off over territory or a burrow, they face one another and snap, firing those shockwaves like threats across a line. Often, the whole dispute gets settled by the sound and the show of force alone, without either shrimp ever making contact. The claw is a hunting tool, a weapon, and a way of shouting, all at once. For an animal that can barely see, sound and pressure are how it argues, how it warns off rivals, and how it wins a fight without ever throwing a real punch. And then, there is its strangest relationship of all. Many pistol shrimp live in partnership with a fish, usually a goby. The deal is simple and surprisingly fair. The pistol shrimp is nearly blind, but it is an excellent digger, so it builds and maintains a burrow that both animals share. The goby has sharp eyes, but no home, so it stands guard at the entrance. While the shrimp works outside, it keeps one antenna resting on the goby. If danger approaches, the goby flicks its tail, the shrimp feels the signal, and both dart into the burrow together. A nearly blind digger and a sharp-eyed lookout, sharing a house and watching each other's backs. It is one of the tidiest partnerships in the ocean. That partnership exists for a reason, and it quietly reveals the shrimp's weakness. For all its firepower, the pistol shrimp is nearly blind and physically fragile. Out in the open, away from its burrow, it is an easy meal for any fish fast enough to grab it. Its great claw is a close-range weapon, useless against a predator that strikes from a distance. And building all that snapping power costs energy and leaves the rest of the animal small and soft. So the shrimp spends its whole life tied to a hole in the seafloor, rarely straying far, leaning on a sharp-eyed roommate just to step outside in safety. The most explosive weapon on the reef belongs to one of its most vulnerable residents. So why do scientists care about all this, beyond the spectacle? Because the pistol shrimp is a master of cavitation, the same violent collapse of bubbles that can damage boat propellers, pumps, and underwater machinery. By studying how this little animal generates and survives such intense forces, engineers learn more about controlling cavitation in our own technology. The shrimp has been quietly solving a hard physics problem for millions of years, and we are still taking notes. There is even interest in that strange flash of light. Making light from a collapsing bubble points to truly extreme conditions, packed into a tiny space. And physicists study these collapses to understand just how much energy can be squeezed into a single point. A shrimp's claw, of all things, ends up sitting at the edge of some genuinely hard questions in physics. Not bad for an animal that spends most of its life hiding in a hole in the sand. So let us go back to that quiet reef, and the little shrimp hiding in its burrow, claw cocked and waiting. You know now what it really is, not a monster. A small, shy, nearly blind animal that built one of the most extreme weapons in nature, not out of muscle or venom, but out of physics. With one snap, it fires a jet of water, tears open a bubble of vacuum, and lets that bubble collapse with enough force to stun a fish, throw off a flash of light, and briefly heat a speck of the sea to nearly the temperature of the sun's surface. It is one of the loudest things in the ocean, loud enough to hide a submarine. And it does all of it with a claw. It can move from one side of its body to the other. That is the real lesson of the pistol shrimp. The most extreme force in a place is not always wielded by the biggest creature. Sometimes it belongs to the smallest one, the one that figured out how to turn plain water into a weapon. It never grew bigger. It never grew fangs. It learned to make the water itself do the work. And in doing so, it ended up brushing against extremes of heat, light, and sound that we usually only find in places far stranger than a quiet reef. So here's my question for you, and I would love to hear what you think. If a shrimp the size of your finger can briefly create a flash of light and a spot of near-sun heat just by snapping a claw, how many other tiny, ordinary-looking animals are quietly bending the laws of physics right under our noses? If this changed the way you hear the ocean, subscribe. Every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice. And the next time you put your head underwater near a reef, and you hear that strange, steady crackle, like static or frying oil, now you know. That is not the reef settling. That is thousands of tiny pistols, going off, one snap at a time.